Sure, absolutely. Oh, great. Perfect. Yeah. So hi, everyone. I guess Colleen introduced myself. So my name's Rishi. I work at Salesforce. I've been there just over a year now. And I work in the strategy and analytics team. So just doing internal analytics for a particular org, so customer success. And, doing all sorts of Tableau stuff, building dashboards, internal analytics, things like that.
Excellent. Thank you, Rishi. And Nandas, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, my name is Nandas Virvidakis. I'm a Bentley graduate from 2013. I did the MBA there. I manage now the professional services team at ActionIQ. ActionIQ is a marketing technology software as a service platform. The professional services team has two arms. One is the engagement management team, and they are responsible for all the business analysis, project management, consulting for integrating and running the platform with our customers. And then I also manage the field engineering team, and the field engineering team is a team of data engineers and analysts who are responsible for integrating the platform and setting up all the data pipelines, making sure that everything is working seamlessly for our customers. So these are the two types of kind of things that we are doing. In the past, I've kind of managed a variety of different teams and projects in the analytics space, from data science to data mining, dashboards, business intelligence reporting, products that deliver this type of services, etc. So a broad broad experiences there.
Fantastic. My next question is just, what was that moment that you knew it was analytics for you? What excited you? Was it a class you took? Just what was that moment for you?
Yeah, sure. I actually did a bunch of different internships when I was still a student, and just working in finance and then doing some consulting. And when I came to Salesforce and did analytics here, I was like, wow, this is an industry that's growing. This is an industry that has so much potential. And I mean, the work's great. You're making a tangible impact on a day-to-day basis. So that was it for me in terms of going into analytics.
And Nandas, your whole career has been around data, has been around analytics.
Yeah. So I started off as a consultant for Ernst & Young. And one of the projects that I go to was in a financial services company. I used to be in Greece at the time, and a French bank had acquired a Greek bank, and they were trying to transform the way that they operate. And a core component of that was a project to unify a variety of data sources. The system was kind of product centric, so they had like multiple databases for each of the different products. And the point was consolidating all that information, unifying the customer profiles, deduplicating them, running a segmentation exercise on top of that, and then re-engineering the operational model at the branches, the customer support model through that exercise. So first of all, I even though my studies were on maths and finance, I didn't intend to go into financial services when I completed them, and I also hadn't had that much of interaction with data. But when I realized the level of transformation that data can bring to a company, that's kind of what kind of drew me in, and excited me about data. And as a result, I was hired by that bank to run their data mining and campaign management teams at the time. So I kind of transitioned from from more data infrastructure type of work and transformational exercises to kind of managing more operational teams from a data perspective. But I think to answer your question, Colleen, I think the level of how transformative data is and how it can drive revenue, I think are a couple of things that kind of excited me about data.
Mm-hmm. And both of you have had previous experience in consulting, which I find fascinating. What would you say are some of the skills that you developed through that consultancy type of role that you had that you feel you brought over into the area that you're in right now and the roles that you're in?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my consulting experience wasn't very long. I quickly realized that was not something I was going to do, but 6 months of work, it was pretty much understanding different storylines and how a deck is really about telling a story and convincing them of a message rather than just a bunch of different slides put together. So it was a very story-based approach that really supported, coming into the data space and then helping adding data to share that story.
Excellent. And Nandis?
Yeah, I fully agree with Rishi. I think that storytelling is a big part of data. Like you shouldn't look at data as a standalone element. I think being able to ask the right questions, like sometimes when you're in the data space, people will ask you for an outcome. They will say, "Hey, I need a report that gives me this," right? So being able to understand what is the purpose, what is the intent of that work, asking the right questions, building a hypothesis, testing it out, and building a story. I think these are some of the important skills that I think the consulting space helps with. Yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you. If you look back into your graduate programs, even undergrad programs, was there a class you took that you think was so valuable that even today you say, wow, I'm so thrilled I took that class, or that I gained this knowledge in the classroom? Most likely, probably in the graduate programs, but you could even go as far back as undergrad.
Yeah, so I actually didn't go to grad school. I went to grad and then it was pretty much, just work after that. But a lot of the classes around data visualization and just data mining, or even just more technical classes, because I went to Absence not too far and very much business school as well. So, business classes are all around, but it's the technical classes that really help.
Great. And then Nandis?
So I had a little bit of a different experience because my studies were not on hands-on data work. So I didn't study analytics and data. I kind of got to learn it through practicing it. So I would say for the classes that helped me in my role now, which is a little bit more high level, it's not as much hands-on, are things that are related to strategy, organizational behavior, project management. I remember Bill Schiano was doing that at Bentley, so I thought that was also very, very useful. Now, if I went back to school though, just to kind of be a little bit more specific to your question, I think I think that SQL, Python, R, if somebody does those three things, these are skills that you can't go wrong with. Data modeling, data visualization are also pretty important skills. I think one needs to understand two things: how to structure the data in a way that helps them analyze and tell the story that they want, and then the visualization, I think, goes back to what Rishi was talking about before, the storyline and making sure you have a good story.
What do you enjoy most about the role you're in right now?
Yeah.
Everything, right?
Well, there are good days and there are not so good days, but I guess the work flexibility more than anything else, just because analytics is such a space where there is a lot of work that can be done, not necessarily right in front of the person. You have to go back a lot of times, you have to do a lot of iterations of the stories, and you can work off site and just come back to it and say, here's the storyline that we have, or here's the data we're finding. And the cool part is you never really know what you're going to find. So there can be a day where you're assuming that this is your hypothesis and you're hoping to find data that'll back it up. But at the end of the day, it might be something completely different, and that'll, change the investment strategy for the company accordingly.
Wow, that's fascinating. Nandis?
I think like from a data perspective, one of the things that I like is that now I work in a company that gives me access to a variety of different data. Like we work with a lot of industries, and I've been kind of pigeonholed a little bit in my earlier career in financial services data. So, you know, it's interesting to understand the companies through their data. I enjoy that a lot. The other part is that my team is at times needs to be the glue that brings together what the customer needs and what the product can do out of the box. So like there's a lot of solutioning involved in the work that we do, trying to figure out how we can use data, how we can leverage it in a way that will stretch the product capabilities and kind of go, you know, over what it would do kind of out of the box. And I think that kind of covers a little bit the data side of things. I think there's also an element to like of the fact that I'm working in a startup that also makes my role, you know, very enjoyable. And it's, you know, it's the fact that you know, everything that you do or don't do has an immediate impact, so you can see the result of your work. Sometimes in bigger organizations, you know, you sometimes cannot understand how your work has a result in the end outcome of the company, and that's not something that happens in a smaller company. And also that there is constant change, new challenges all the time, you know, like the company is growing. So you solve a problem for scale X, and then you got to solve the same problem for scale Y, right? So like problems are either changing or, you know, or you get new challenges ahead of you. So it keeps you on your toes and always very engaged and excited.
Which brings me to my next question, because you mentioned the challenges. What are some of the challenges that you face in your role? And it might not even be in your role, maybe within your experience working with data. What's been so challenging about that?
For sure, there are day-to-day challenges, and then there are long-term challenges as well. But a majority of the day-to-day challenges are really interacting with the different stakeholders and really understanding what the outcome is that Nandas was mentioning earlier, what it is that the stakeholder requires. So there is, one image or one idea of, and this is just an example, but let's say there's a particular dashboard requirement for one org. It may be possible that there are several different orgs that are similar who've already done that work, and teams have already put in the effort to, mine the data, source the data, just put together the analysis, put together the dashboards. But a lot of work may get duplicated. And I guess this is because it's a larger company. A lot of times we may get lost within ourselves that, hey, are we doing this job from a repetitive perspective? Are we doing something that's already being done by others? So that's something of a challenge that we have to keep a lookout for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you, Rishi. And Nandas, same question for you. What are some of the challenges? I mean, you have a team you're managing, I'm sure from an executive level, there's very different type of challenges.
Yeah, I think my role is not as hands-on anymore. So the challenges that I have to face typically, especially in a growing organization, are typically related to scale. Like what type of, how should the team be structured to operate in the best way possible? How do you keep people engaged and excited about what they're doing on their day-to-day? I think the interesting thing about this is that you'll see it as companies grow. There is a trend towards specialization, right? Like when you're a small company, everyone does a little bit of everything. But as you grow, there is a need to start kind of carving out more specialized roles, and that has pros and cons for the people that are in the roles, right? Like the pros are that people can be more focused, more dedicated, and don't get distracted by other things, so they can like really hone into the things that you want them to do. But the cons are that people feel like they're losing part of what they were doing before, right? Like when you start specializing, on one hand, you're like, hey, I want to be more focused. Like I can't be distracted by things. But when you get people to like focus on one thing, they're like, oh, but I really like doing a little bit of everything. So that's an example of like, one of the challenges. I think from a data perspective, this was from an executive perspective and like from a management challenge, but from a data perspective, I think what I said before, like making sure that we become that glue, like we understand what type of solutions our customers want to achieve, and kind of working around the particularities of each data structure to deliver what they want us to do, which is a fun challenge. It's a solution design focused challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the best experience that you had, which helped you develop the skills that you apply in your role today? You know, if you think back of all the experience you've had.
Sure. I actually came into this role without the technical skills that would potentially be needed for the role. So it was a bit of a steep incline curve in terms of, hey, you know, challenges from day one, and what are we really going to do to get the job done? So that was a little bit interesting for me. I guess I had a bit of a different experience than others would. But, yeah, besides that, once you start getting into the flow of things, it's more about just recognizing where you need help and asking people for the right support. Because support is available, it's just you have to be willing to ask for it.
And Rishi, how did you find the role through Salesforce? Was it just posted? Was it, you know, was it through networking?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. So there was some background networking that went into it. And then, you know, I saw the post, so reached out to someone who was actually an alumni of the school.
Oh, that's great.
Through there.
That's wonderful. I hope all of the graduate students that are on right now really heard that message of the networking can work. And Nandis, I would like to ask you the same question. About yours.
Yeah. So listen, with regards to kind of what the experiences that shaped up my career in the future, I think I would say in my earlier career, the project that I mentioned, I think was, you know, a fantastic experience because it was an end-to-end experience. Like it gave me the opportunity to like understand like everything from the ground up and how it can transform the business. I think that was a great one. And then in my later career, I think my roles at Morgan Stanley helped me understand and operate at a different level of scale and kind of helped me not be intimidated by it, which I think, you know, might happen sometimes. So I think these were the two things. With regards to like the job search, I'm not going to talk necessarily about like ActionIQ. I'll talk about my prior role because I think that's maybe the one that's most relevant to the people in the room. Like I will double down on networking and using the resources from the career services. I've had an amazing relationship with the career services folks. I you know, they were next to me hand in hand. I say this and I feel emotional about it. They really were there for me, and they did have a great impact in the way that I approached my job search. You know, presented myself, networked, put my resume together. The way that I found the job was, and it's an interesting story. Wendy D'Ambrose, who was my counselor at the time, she had got me in touch with somebody that used to work for Morgan Stanley, had just moved somewhere else. And I was supposed to go meet him on a Friday, kind of midday for a coffee somewhere in New York. And there was a snowstorm. She told me, I asked her, hey, Wendy, should I go for this meeting? Or, you know, I think I'm going to get stuck in New York if I do this. And she's like, hey, boy, you better go to that meeting. You gotta make sure you meet the people there. And I did, and I think that was like I had a great contact with that person, and that's kind of what he happened to know the hiring manager for a position I was interested in. They got my resume in front of that person, and kind of that's what started everything. The one thing I would also add here is that like I also did a lot of due diligence through other resources at Morgan Stanley at the time. I found other graduates that were in the space that I was looking into, and I tried to use them to get a sense of like what's happening in the projects that I was applying for, like get a little bit more inside info. So like when I was speaking with a hiring manager, I would not be unprepared, but like I would know what's going on at the company, and other right, and other people. Audra, it was not Joe Mitchell. Joe Mitchell joined a little bit later. Actually, I preceded him, but there were other people in the analyst program, so fairly junior folks that helped me out there. gave me a context. They happen to also work for the project. So I would say use the resources that the career services is offering you. Make sure you do your networking and don't lose opportunities to meet new people. And if you're really interested into a particular role, just make sure you use the Bentley alumni network to kind of help you out there.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to ask you also if there's any major changes going on right now, in analytics or, kind of per your role that you would see, within analytics that students should be aware of. Are there any new trends? Is there a particular platform that the students should be fully aware of? Something new going on in analytics, if there is such a thing going on right now in a trend or anything. Rishi?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I don't think this is a very new trend, at least what I'm going to talk about, but the Tableau platform is something that's utilized on a day-to-day basis. So for me, I mean, pretty much, I would say half of my day is spent in Tableau, because when you're interacting with a lot of different stakeholders and different data sources, it's more about, having a platform that'll allow us to show them the data in the most simple format. So you don't want to be showing reports. You don't want to be, showing one pagers. It's more about interactive dashboards. That's something that's becoming more and more frequent across the industry.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rishi. And Nandis, are you seeing anything?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. The one thing I'm seeing is that there's like two types of data analyst profiles emerging. I think there's like one that is more focused on business intelligence type of roles, BI focused, where more traditional and out of the box tools are being used, like SQL and like Tableau, like Rishi said, which I think is like a very, very powerful tool. Like I've used it in the past, and it's been great. And then there's another category which is a little bit more computer science focused, which is people using more open source tools, more advanced analytic skills and techniques, like Python, R, Jupyter notebooks, and stuff like that. So I think one of the things that people need to think about is like, what type of path would they like to take, and double down on the skills, in each of those two categories. I think the first category you will find more in kind of more traditional, bigger organizations, and then if you go to like smaller, more technically focused organizations, you will find the latter type of skills.
And Nandis, go ahead, Nandis. I'm sorry.
No, please complete your question.
I just wanted to see, I'm not familiar with Jupyter, and maybe others here on the meeting are not as well. So I just wanted to get some insight into Jupyter a bit.
Yeah, it's a tool that's being used for data analysis. I can send you some more information if you'd like to share with the students afterwards.
Sure, that would be great. That would be great. So we have students here who are going to be applying for jobs, and then they go through the process, hoping to be selected for an interview. What is some advice you could give to a student to be well prepared before going into their interview? Rishi?
Yeah.
If you'd like to
Yeah, for sure. I think Nandas actually spoke about it a little bit earlier when he was, talking about not just networking with the people of the company, but also talking to people who are in a similar role, just to find out what sort of projects are going on, because that really makes an impact towards not just the recruiter or hiring manager, but when you're doing your final interviews, you can actually bring up problems that the organization or the team is facing. So when it comes down to it, you can, you're not providing recommendations, but at least you're saying you're aware of these problems and you have thoughts about how you can potentially approach these different problems.
That's great. And Rishi, I just wanted to ask, have you been through the case interview process?
No, so I actually didn't have to go through it.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. And Nandis, maybe you can speak to both as well. Maybe if you went through a case interview at one time, or if you want to just focus on interviewing tips for students for preparing. Great.
Yeah. I did not go through the case interview. I remember at Morgan Stanley, they asked me a little bit more abstract questions, like more, a little bit more specific to analytics. So I would say, I don't know how I would prepare for this, to be honest with you. Like the questions that they asked me were pretty random. So I don't have a great tip for these type of questions. But what I would say generally, like as Rishi said, and like going back to the point that I made before, make sure you do your due diligence about the company. Look at what are the news of the company recently. Go to their website. Look at the executives that you're going to speak with. Try to get to the hiring manager versus going through HR as much as possible. See if you have connections with people there, and try to leverage them. Make sure you ask them a lot of questions as well, right? Make sure you ask them about, like, because you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, right? You want to make sure you do the best next step. So you want to make sure you ask them the right questions. Be open when you go to that interview. If they're putting you through a case study or any type of technical problem that you have to solve, sometimes it's not about necessarily having the right answer, but it's about communicating the way that you're thinking. So sometimes you might not be able to provide the right end answer, but just make sure that as you're thinking through this, you are explaining what you're thinking about and what your line of thought is. Ask questions to clarify things that you're not sure about. Don't just straight jump into the answer. Give yourself some time to ask questions and kind of explain your line of thinking. Send a thank you note after. I think that kind of goes a long way. And I think generally, at the more high level, think about which paths you want to take, but don't be too worried about the exact role that you're going to get. Like, just make sure you go into an environment, like, that's why I said, like, you have to interview them. Make sure you go to in an environment where it's going to be a learning and growing environment. You're going to have like good people that you're going to be working with, interesting projects that you're going to be working at, and then things will find their way if you work hard and you're excited about what you're doing and you're learning. One thing will lead to the other.
Thank you, Nandis. And Rishi, I'm just going to ask you a little bit about the Salesforce culture. What do you like about it? What drew you to Salesforce? I know many students say to me, I have 3 companies I'm really interested in, and all 3 I would love to be at, and there's differences between every company. So I just want to know what drew you to Salesforce.
Yeah, for sure. Before I dive into that, just adding up a little bit to Nandis's last point, with regards to the role. So when I was actually applying, I didn't apply for the role that I'm currently in now. So, it's very much about just applying to the company, and then, you end up interviewing for a different role, interviewing for multiple different roles, and then that happens very frequently. So that's something to keep in mind.
Wow. Right.
And with Salesforce in general, the culture is great. Just being around people who are challenging you on a day-to-day basis, but not just challenging you, they're supporting you. So people are invested in your growth, your manager, your mentor. That's something, you get on, you have like weekly or bi-weekly sessions with your manager about your growth, where you see yourself going, do you want to change roles? And the good thing about this being such a big company is if there's something you're more interested in, you can always pivot. So you have the opportunity to say, hey, I've been working on this for a year, but I'm interested in that project. Can I just go shadow someone else there? So that's a huge benefit of, potentially doing that and then changing teams as well.
Fantastic. And Nandis, you've been in a few different environments and now at ActionIQ. I'd love to hear kind of the differences of companies going from Morgan Stanley to what appeared to be a startup at one time. So
I think, look, I had a great experience at Morgan Stanley, and I had a great experience here too. So like I can't complain on either front. They are very different at the same time, right?
Yeah.
when you're in a much larger organization, there's less stuff that you can influence. I mean, you can eventually, but it takes a little bit more time to get there. So I think that's one of the kind of differences there. At the same time, as I mentioned, like, it gives you the opportunity to experience scale in a very organized environment, and a very professional environment. So it gives you a set of skills that can an experience as well that can help you apply in everywhere, even in a smaller environment at the end of the day. Now, ActionIQ, I think, is it's still in a high growth mode. So it has some characteristics that are related to that. Like some of the great things is that, as I mentioned before, like the challenges are constantly changing. You're always on your toes. There's always interesting things to solve for. And you can see the impact of your work in the day-to-day company kind of progress, right? So like whatever you do or you don't do, as I mentioned before, you can see how it's affecting the organizational growth. I think that's one side of things. So it's related to the startup environment and the growth stage that we're in. But there's other things that have to do with the company itself and the way that it's being run. And I think there's a huge focus on people. Everybody's like very focused on like getting stuff done. There's no unnecessary politics. Everybody's backing each other up. Everybody's excited about what they do. And there is a significant focus and attention on communication, culture, personal and professional growth. So I really appreciate those elements, giving responsibility, to and kind of having the chance to grow within and as part of the organization. I've been here for about 4 years and I've changed three roles. So like that ability to get extended responsibilities and continue to grow, I think has been great. So these are some of the things.
Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions at this time. So if anybody here on the program would like to ask Rishi or Anandis a question, you can either unmute yourself or you can put the question right in, and we do have a question. So what is your opinion on analytics getting into product management area, where a lot of product companies are using analytics to make product decisions? Do you think that doing that kind of expansion is a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty heavy question as a whole, but when it comes to analytics, a lot of the product management teams and analytics teams, at least for us, they work together. It's more about the product managers gathering not just requirements for one project, but rather understanding the project in its entirety. And, it's just the analytics role, at least from this perspective, is more about learning how to build, and then moving into product management is about looking at the bigger picture. So I feel it's rather like a stepping stone. Also, for me, a little bit new to the industry. So, in years to come, it's more about learning what the product managers really need and what their role is. But at the moment, it feels like a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Nandis, did you?
Yeah, I do. I think, so I don't know if it's expanding, but I definitely know it's important, right? Like, so as like having managed the product, if you don't know how your product is being used, you can't really make decisions about how to evolve that product, right? So what is the adoption of the product? What is the impact that your product is having? What are the parts of the product that people are spending more time on? Like all those insights are very important in defining the product roadmap and ensuring its success. So I don't know if it's expanding necessarily, but it has and will continue to be a very core component of the product management function, I would say.
Thank you. And we have another question. Can you share the key skills or traits you look for in a candidate for analytics at your company? And do you require or expect the candidates to know all of the required codes or languages right at the start?
Yeah, I guess this can go a little bit either way. So if you do have the skills, at least from a technical perspective, also depends on what sort of role you're applying to, right? Because if it's an analyst role and there's a lack of probably languages, different languages for coding or Tableau or like visualizations and things like that, are you really applying for the best role? Is this the best role at this point in time? Or maybe there's another role that suits your skill better. But for analytics roles, at least ground on, like, right at ground level hands-on roles, it is important because at least with Salesforce, I've seen different people come in and teams usually expect you to get started fairly quickly. Like, of course, you have time to understand the different models and how things work, but it does really help having the skills. Yep.
So I'll give you a little bit of a different perspective to this but of course it depends. So you don't necessarily need to have the specific languages that we use, but people need to have like some kind of understanding of like how data works, like what are the data structures. So like as an example, if you don't know Python but you know C++, for example, like a programming language, I think picking up like another object-oriented programming language is going to be okay. But if you don't understand how data works, I think that's going to be a little bit more complex. Also, as I mentioned, like we don't expect people to like know everything, but it's a lot about what is their problem-solving approach. So I want to make sure that people are taking a pause, asking the right questions, are able to explain their line of thought, because I think that helps people solve problems. And data, what we do with that, we solve data problems, right? Like that's kind of what we do a lot. So yeah, these are some of the thoughts that I have around this. Like I don't like, for us, I think it's important to have some understanding of technology and data. It doesn't necessarily have to be the languages that we use within our company. But again, the other thing is like we're also hiring fairly, like in my team, we hire for fairly junior roles, and we have a very rigorous onboarding program as well that helps people get up to speed with what they need to do. Other things that help in my space, because the people that work in my team go more towards the more path, more BI type of path, is having an understanding of like how AWS infrastructure works, how GitHub works, like some more of the computer science parts of the kind of the analytical functions. So yeah, these are some of the things that we look for.
Thank you. Any students that are on the program, please feel free to use the chat box, or you can unmute to ask any questions you may have for Rishi or Nandis. We'll give it a couple minutes. I'm just going to throw another question to you, and that is, what advice do you have for these students today? Just advice you want to share, and really, encourage them to go in the direction of data analytics.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like from an advice perspective, it's more about just, I wouldn't worry about saying that, hey, this is exactly what I want to do, because there are so many different roles with, things that we can learn that we don't even know exist. So there are probably roles that there's probably a role I'll end up in 5 years, which I don't even know exists at the moment. So the industry is so ever evolving at any point in time. It's all about, if you find something exciting, just pursue it and then take it from there. Yeah.
Great. That's great advice, Rishi. And Nandis?
Yeah, I agree with Rishi 100%. I think expanding on this a little bit more, I think you should spend some time, like as part of your networking exercise, you should ask people like what's happening in their organizations. Like there are roles that you can't, like, not that are going to come up in the future, but are currently in place that you can't even imagine exist, right? Like, so I think it's a good thing to network and speak with people, not just to find a job, but also to find the job that you know that you will that you think is a good fit for you. Like understanding what the landscape looks like, what are the trends, how teams are structured, you know, how what you want to do would bring value to an organization. So, you know, my advice is like network for the purpose of finding a job, but also for understanding the landscape, and you know what's out there, and what's, you know, how it would be the best fit for what you want to do.
Thank you. And before we conclude, we still have time for maybe one or two more questions. So I'm gonna just have a little lull here for a second. If anybody does have a question, wants to put it in the chat, or you can unmute. This is the time we have the professionals here.
While we have that lull, can I? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Nandos. Hi everyone, I'm Mabuba. I'm in MS in Business Analytics program here. So I have a question to Rishi and Nandos, both of you. I know I was listening Rishi talking about applying Tableau most of the time for his work. So I have kind of basic knowledge for Tableau, Python, and R. So I was wondering, like, after joining position, do I have to have like advanced skills, or like my basic skills would be okay to start at an entry level?
Yeah, that's definitely a great question. You know, from an entry level perspective, of course, basic skills help. And as time goes on and, you know, you figure out more of the data pieces, you'll realize that there are different tools that exist, which you'll just pick up as time goes on, because different members in your team are using them. So they're like, oh, you know, this exists, and then they'll show it to you. So you're like, oh, wow. So as time goes on, like, at least I've felt my team members have supported me a lot and taught me different things I didn't know.
Can I ask that you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so my question was like, for entry-level positions, do I have to have like advanced skills, or like knowing, as Rishi was telling, like there are different kinds of ways to do things. So do I have to have like knowledge for more advanced, but how do I say it? Like more advanced knowledge for doing analytical exercise or something, or my basic level would be okay?
Yeah, I mentioned positions, like the you know, like people do not expect that you know everything, right? Like it's a matter of you know, being excited, showing the character that that you can jump in and learn new things, that you can also give examples of become independent in the past, even if it's not within a working environment, but like showing that ability, excitement, and aptitude to and it's less about, I think, the advanced skills. I mean, of course, yeah, some basic skills you will be tested on, and you should kind of polish them, but there's definitely a lot of things that you will be given the opportunity to kind of learn.
Thank you.
Thank
Go ahead.
I was thanking them. Thank you for your answers, Nandos and Rishi.
Excellent. Thank you, Mahaba. So we have a question here from Mohana, and that is, will companies consider certifications more if you have it within your resume or without certifications? Do you weigh it in more? Do you think that that makes a winning impression?
Well, I would actually say it really depends, because having certifications doesn't hurt. So, you have them and you mention them on your resume, great, fantastic. But if it comes down to it and you're in an interview where you probably don't have the physical copy of the certification, but you have the knowledge and you can discuss that with the teams, with the hiring manager, I think that really goes a long way too. So certifications help, they don't hurt, but you can also talk about it. Yeah.
Nandos, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it might help in some cases, for people to just pay attention to your resume, because like in order for you to speak with them, you have to get the chance to get in front of them. it depends, how relevant the certification is to the skills that people are looking for. Like I mentioned AWS before. If people have an AWS certification and we know that they're not going to have to figure that part out, that helps. If they've done SQL classes at school, it's not a certification necessarily, but that when you see those keywords in the resume, I think the one thing I would caution you on this is if you put certifications and things that and classes that you've done on your resume and you're not comfortable in those skills, I think that can have a bad impression. So be careful about what certifications you put in there, because once you put them, when people speak with you, they will have the expectation that you know them. And if you don't, and that could undermine your chances of getting an opportunity with the company. So that's the only thing I would say.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're going to conclude at this time. I would really like to thank Nandis and Rishi for your time today and just giving us so much great insight into the different roles that you're in and really great insight into data analytics. So thank you for your time, and thank you to the graduate students who were here today. You took the time to really gain some more insight into this exciting area of business. So stay well, everyone, and thank you so much for your time.
Colleen, thank you. Can I say one last thing before we drop off?
Please.
So I just wanted to give a shout out to Lucy, because I mentioned Wendy before, but Lucy was an integral part of me getting the job at Morgan Stanley. She was with me when I was negotiating my compensation at the time, and we have she's passed the anxieties with me. Like I could feel like she was kind of having the same emotions as I did. So I wanna make sure I recognize that, and I want to thank the whole career services and Bentley University for all the great work that
Nandis, I'm so happy you had such a great experience. And again, to any of the graduate students here, please come to our office. We're here to help you. If you have any questions, resume reviews, we have quite a few programs coming up in the next upcoming weeks. And don't forget, we have the career fair coming up next week. So I'm sure you will have lots of questions for us in the graduate career development team. So thank you very much, everyone. Stay well, and we really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.